Hello, I'm Debbie Jihadist. Welcome to my show, America Can We Talk? Today we're going to hit three big stories. One, the Women's March and the new law in New York State about abortion. Second, Jamie Glazov will join me. He's the author of Jihadist Psychopath. And third, State of the Union, the shutdown, and who's winning that battle. Stay tuned.
Debbie Jihadist, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk. I'm Debbie Jihadist, and welcome to my first five. Today, I want to talk about the Women's March. I hadn't all week had the chance to talk about. There was a Women's March in Washington last weekend and also a pro-life march. And they were back-to-back, 2 days in a row. And I read something today I wanted to share with you. I did not attend either. I think that I would have loved to kind of had a bird's eye view on both of them. But I wanted to talk about what the real impact of those two marches is and just some stories that evolved afterwards. One person attended both, and maybe many did, but wrote about it. And anything I talk about in my show, you can go read yourself. The article will be at our website, my website, americacanwetalk.org. But the Women's March had, roughly speaking, about 100,000 people, in the hundreds of thousands of people. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, I'm going to correct that right away. The Right to Life March, the pro-life march, had hundreds of thousands of people there. The Women's March had around 10,000 people there. First point I want to make, the media, the mainstream media, barely covered the Women's March. Now, someone's going to email me and say, oh, I saw there was an article in the New York Times on, page B32. Basically, mainstream media ignored the pro-life march. The pro-life march was huge, and the Women's March much smaller. But the second really interesting thing to contrast these two, the pro-life march is basically there. It was like the 46th annual one, women and men and children there to stand up for the unborn. The entire purpose of the march and the pro-life march is to stand up for the unborn, to celebrate life, to honor life. The bizarreness of the Women's March is summarized in just a few little tidbits. There were people at the Women's March dressed up in costume as a brick wall. So they're there, I guess, arguing that they don't want the wall to be built. Someone was there with a sign saying it's Mueller time with a picture of Trump, I guess arguing that they think the Mueller investigation is going to bring down Trump. This is just one tweet that kind of summarizes my point, that the Women's March, first of all, is a dishonest name. It's not the Women's March. It doesn't stand for women. It stands for left-wing people with all sorts of left-wing views. That's what the Women's March really is. But listen to this one tweet. Women's March, racial justice, safety for women, LGBTQ plus rights, immigrant justice, reproductive justice, equal pay. And I could read you all sorts of other signs that were up, just written by, there's a random, disconnected, no theme, no logic, and some even contradicting each other that all showed up for this Women's March. The point is, the Women's March didn't have a point. It just doesn't have a point. The pro-life march did. But also, I want to hit on today the law that probably you all read about, but the state of New York passed a new law that relates to the abortion. And it essentially, the law says now, the law in the state of New York, signed by Governor Cuomo, says that women can have abortions up until the day their baby is due, up to delivery day. I mean, we're talking about full-term, healthy babies who are ready to be born, and New York State is saying, even at that point, they're so determined to honor this reproductive justice idea, which is an absurd term on it by itself, that they are going to, you can have an abortion legally in New York up to the moment of birth. What you're looking at, the picture behind me, New York State's governor, Cuomo, was so proud of this new law, so proud of this law that said essentially that you can do this up until the moment of birth, that he actually had the, I think this is the World Trade Center tower light, but he had many big buildings in New York City put up a pink victory symbol when the law was passed. That governor of New York, is asking America, asking New Yorkers to celebrate a law that says a full-term, healthy baby can legally be killed because somehow he believes that is honoring reproductive justice, to use his term. In fact, with his remarks, he's standing in front of a podium that says, reproductive justice, no time to wait. And I want to just make a contrast with his story, with what they were trying to celebrate, and another, which is, I want to show that couple with the baby. With this couple, you're going to see a picture here in a moment. There was news this past week, one couple in America, as well as this couple you're looking at, who I think are in England. What you're looking at is a baby who was born to this couple who had, during the time this woman was carrying the baby, the doctors diagnosed the baby had spinal bifida, in utero, spinal bifida, huge, challenging disability. This woman left England, went to Germany, had in vitro, or in utero surgery. A doctor operated on her baby in her womb, fixed the problem that was to be otherwise would develop into a horrific case of spinal bifida, and the baby was born perfectly healthy. In the United States, another case happened like that just this week. A couple decided, instead of taking the advice of doctors and pursuing abortion when a spinal bifida case was diagnosed, the couple said, no, we're going to go forward, we're going to try this surgery. And again, in America too, this was completely successful. The baby was born this past Friday, perfectly healthy, born, which they were really watching for, kicking its legs, waving its arms, obviously perfectly able to move. Spinal damage did not prevent this baby from being able to move. This is what should cause politicians to light up the New York, whatever it was in New York State, you know, the Trade Center tower, all the big buildings. If you're going to celebrate something in this country, celebrate the idea that we have doctors and parents and families and just Americans who want to help preserve and save life. The decision by Governor Cuomo in New York, causing, by the way, some of the Catholic bishops to question his faith, which is a good darn question, but that governor is so wrapped up in identifying with the reproductive justice crowd, the pro-choice crowd, the pro-abortion crowd, that he thought signing a bill into law that says full-term babies can be murdered at birth, and we're protecting that as somehow protecting women's rights, that was an egregious, disgusting display of of disdain for the simple value of life. I'm Debbie Georges, and that is my first five. Do we have him? And welcome back to America Can We Talk. As I mentioned before our break, we have a guest joining us today. It is he's an author named Jamie Glazov. I'm going to show you on Facebook Live his book. It's called Jihadist Psychopath, and the subtitle is very good: How He is Charming, Seducing, and Devouring Us. Jamie Glazov, this is the book, and I believe we have him online. Hi, Jamie.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad you're here too. I want to take a moment to tell our guests a little bit more about you. First of all, Dennis Prager, who is one of our, wonderful American commentators, what the line that is his recommendation about this book on the front cover, Dennis Prager says about this book, Jihadist Psychopath, one of the most important books of the present time. That's by Dennis Prager. In fact, the beginning of the book is filled with really strong praises for this book and what it uncovers. So I'm going to start with, you have a lot of us who talk about radical Islam a lot and talk about the danger to America. We read about attacks, we read about what's happening in Europe, we read about the ideology of Islam. You have a really novel approach in this book, because you're making the argument essentially that Islamic jihadists and Islamic supremacists conduct their mission in a way very similar to how actually diagnosed psychopaths do. Is that an accurate statement? Is that right?
That's very accurate. Thank you very much. Absolutely.
So I would love to have you just tell us, why do you say that? I mean, I'd love to hear an explanation of why are you making that parallel?
Well, thank you so much. Look, for years I studied how psychopaths operate, and they have a step-by-step program. It involves the romance stage, there's a seduction stage, a charming stage, and then once they have their claws into you, other steps begin to materialize, and they inflict other tactics on their prey and on their victims. As I studied Islam and how Islam is taking over the West and how we're surrendering, and all the methods of jihad and stealth jihad, Islamization, etc., I began to see that every single step by which psychopaths conquer their victims is exactly what's happening to the West. Look, I'll give you a quick example. I can tell you a lot about the charming phase and seduction phase, but after the capture, after the claws go in, the psychopath is an expert at several things with his victim. The psychopath is an expert at punching a victim in the face, and then the psychopath sulks and pouts, and the victim is apologizing to him. Psychopaths play the pity card. They're always feeling sorry for themselves. They're the real victims. They never apologize, and the victims apologize to them. Does it ring familiar? Does it sound familiar? For instance, just in France, a jihadist was running around with a knife screaming Allahu Akbar, stabbing unbelievers. And guess how our media, our establishment media, presented that? Oh, the Muslim community is fearing a backlash. And all of a sudden, the unbelievers in the West are apologizing to the Muslim community for how Islamophobic we are. Instead of the Muslim community apologizing to us that its texts inspire and sanction what jihadists do.
That, I'll tell you, I've never heard that theory, and it is so logical. I mean, your book is really compelling, and it's very logical. And I remember back right after September 11th, almost in America, almost immediately after that attack, stories began emerging about fear of backlash against Muslims, and the whole idea that our job as Americans is to understand Islam as a religion of peace. And it was almost before anyone had even taken responsibility or we had identified the groups that were involved in the attack. We were busy blaming ourselves. Do you recall that
Absolutely.
too?
Debbie, it's part of the Stockholm Syndrome. And let me give another example. There's so many steps. I don't want to give too many spoilers. People are going to have to read the book, but it's step after step after step. I'll give another quick step. In the beginning stage, there's a seduction stage. Now, psychopaths learn from their master in the Garden of Eden, Satan, who said to Eve, "It is in your interest that you eat this apple." They try to say that it's in your interest to do something, and there's many things we can say about that. But for now, I'm going to emphasize another strategy. During the it's in your interest phase, the psychopath also always stresses how we are so much alike. We're very much alike. It's a very important tactic during the seduction stage. Now, let me see the desperate Christians who have Stockholm Syndrome, who want to be deceived. What's happening today? The Muslim Brotherhood front groups are involved in their interfaith dialogue, and they approach the Christians and they say, "We love Jesus, you love Jesus, you love Jesus, we love Jesus too. We're so much alike." Now, the intelligent and brave Christians will say right away, "Excuse me, did Jesus die on the cross? Is Jesus divine? Is Jesus a member of the Holy Trinity?" Then the deceiver grows ashen white and runs away. But in most cases, that does not happen, and we allow this deception to take place. It's the "we are a lot of like" tactic, and it comes in the beginning charming phase. I give all of these phases in the psychopath's world, and I give the mirror in the Islamization process that's occurring right now. And Debbie, it's very frightening.
Oh, I could not agree more. It's very frightening. And I've been actually reading a lot about what's happening in Europe, and you write about it, what's happening in France and in England and all over Western Europe. And I want to, though, for our listeners, focus on America for a moment. Many of us in America watch what's happening in Europe, and we obviously don't want to have the violent jihadist attacks, but I think America is just awakening to the reality that almost worse than the violent attacks in Europe is this Islamization process, this Islamization of just slowly, not necessarily violently, but insidiously and persistently taking over European cultures, where the European culture surrenders to or agrees that it must honor and, in fact, prop up Islamic culture. A great example you have near the somewhere in your book, you were talking about the what's happening in Germany when they've had so many Islamic refugees coming in. They had a horrible incident in Cologne, Germany. I think it was December 2015 or New Year's Eve. And the German mayor ended up blaming the girls who were sexually assaulted by the Islamic immigrants instead of blaming the wrongdoers.
Debbie, you are dead on, and you're hitting bingo, very profound, and you're really crystallizing what's happening. Look, where can we even start? Robert Spencer, Pamela Geller, heroes like that, marginalized in our culture, marginalized in our boundaries of discourse, libeled and slandered with all kinds of awful names, as you know. And yet they're the human rights activists. They're the ones that are trying to protect this society and also to protect Muslim women and girls from Islamic gender apartheid. You see, the Islamic supremacists and the left, they're very clever in what they've done. For instance, they've racialized Islam and they've conflated Muslims with Islam. It's a very smart dual strategy. So anybody, for instance, like if I say something like, I think female genital mutilation is a bad thing, they would say, oh, you're racist. You hate all Muslims. And they're very effective at that. But Islam is not a race. And also, we're trying to protect Muslim people. We love Muslim people. We're trying to protect Muslim girls. But they're very effective in how they slander and libel people that are trying to stand up against them. Look, even on Twitter, Tommy Robinson has been banned. Anne-Marie Waters banned. Laura Loomer banned. These are wonderful human rights activists standing up for Western civilization, for the Judeo-Christian tradition, for Muslim and non-Muslim people. And so what's happening on social media bleeds into what's happening in the rest of our culture and also reflects what's happening in our culture. Robert Spencer, for instance, can't get into the United Kingdom because he's against jihad. But jihadists can get into the United Kingdom because they support jihad. It's just incredible.
It is incredible. I'm going to try to hit two themes that I wish I could talk to you for hours because it is such an important topic for Americans to understand. First theme is, during the Obama administration, he agreed at the behest of the Muslim Brotherhood to remove references in the national security training manuals, in our military training manuals. This is in like October of 2011, I think, but agreed to remove any reference to Islam at all, which is just any reference to jihad, radical Muslims, Islamization, any of those things removed because the Muslim Brotherhood presented that as offensive. I mean, that's not just a poor decision, but that's dangerous to us.
Debbie, that is a surrender. The Muslim Brotherhood front groups, as you said in 2011, approached the Obama administration, said, let us see your intelligence agency manuals, your training manuals. Can you imagine the KGB coming up to an American administration during the Cold War and saying, we want to see your intelligence training manuals, and the administration actually agreeing? Well, that's what happened with Obama. And the Muslim Brotherhood front groups came back and said, take out all these references to Islam and jihad, etc. In other words, Sun Tzu taught us, know thy enemy. Under the Obama administration, we were unable to make a threat assessment. Stephen Coughlin has documented this in Catastrophic Failure, and it is a catastrophic failure because we were unable to say the words jihad, Sharia, Islam, radical Islam, etc. And what was the result of that? Boston Marathon Massacre, Orlando, San Bernardino, I could go on. The Obama administration has blood on its hands because we cannot make a threat assessment. So when the FBI was even interviewing the Tsarnaevs, it had to ask them about what kind of ice cream they like and what baseball games they like. You know, I'm just throwing that out there. But what I mean is they weren't allowed to ask, What do you believe about in the Quran? Do you believe in Islamic supremacism? What mosques do you go to? What beliefs do you have? They weren't allowed to ask any of those questions. This is suicide. Thank God for Donald Trump. As you notice, during his campaign and afterwards, he is starting to say those words, radical Islam, jihad, etc. And because of that, we will be able to preserve and protect ourselves if Trump keeps doing what he's doing.
You know, we've talked in the show many times about the courts in America having just not been willing to let Donald Trump follow through with what he was trying to do with his orders with respect to the refugees and how we vet refugees before they come here when they're coming from countries that are filled with Islamic terrorism. The courts have been undermining him. But the question I want to get to you is, it's accurate from your book, you're saying that there are still plenty of people inside the Trump administration, inside federal agencies and the Trump administration who are friendly and sympathetic to Muslim Brotherhood and therefore undermining his efforts. Is that accurate? And if so, what do we do about that?
Absolutely. Look, this was a disaster under Obama. I mean, let me ask, what was Mohammed Ali Biari doing on the Department of Homeland Security Council? This is a Muslim Brotherhood sympathizer. Right. And we could go on and on and on. This has all been documented, how the Brotherhood infiltrated and penetrated the White House and the government under Obama. Stephen Coughlin has documented that the Muslim Brotherhood was actually shaping our foreign policy and the way that we think. It was a catastrophe. Huma Abedin, on the right-hand side of Hillary Clinton. She comes from a Muslim Brotherhood family and worked for a Muslim Brotherhood organization years back. We could go on and on. So they infiltrated, they've penetrated. You can't get rid of all of them overnight. You can't get rid of this thinking overnight. But thank God for Donald Trump. He's brought in people like John Bolton as his national security advisor. And look, what's really difficult, Debbie, is he's got so many people against him, so many people blocking him. He's even having difficulty with the wall. It's hard for him to get to these things, but we're praying that he does. And he's got the right people around him now. And we're just hoping that his hands will get to these matters because, look, we've got a problem. The Muslim Brotherhood front groups, for instance, were brought in to educate, quote unquote, educate our intelligence agency people, instead of people like Stephen Coughlin, John Guandolo, Bridget Gabriel, Nani Darwish. Those are the people that should be educating our law enforcement and our intelligence agencies. But instead, they've got people like, from CARE and other Brotherhood front groups. It's a disaster.
It is. I want to turn and ask you, use an expression in your book, which I've heard people talking about the red-green axis or the linking of the jihadist mindset, the Islamic supremacists, with left-wingers in this country, with the left-wing mindset. Use the expression unholy alliance. I've heard red-green brotherhood, but why in the world would left-wingers who pretty much want socialism and government control, I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but I want to hear your thoughts. Why would they be linking with the jihadists to the detriment of America?
Well, Debbie, you ask all the right and profound questions. I'm very grateful for that. I tried to dedicate my life to what you just asked. My family escaped from the Soviet Union when I was a very little kid, and I was so grateful to come to America. I love this country. And as a kid, when I came here, even a 5-year-old knows when he smells freedom. But as I grew older, there were these species of people that were telling my parents to shut up, that were telling us that where we came from was a great place and where we are now is an awful place. And I figured out that they were called leftists, and they worshiped Stalin, and they made excuses for Mao Zedong and for the Khmer Rouge and for Castro's Cuba. And I dedicated my life to try to figure out, why do they do this? And they had their romance with communism during the Cold War. And now we see a romance with jihad now. Yes. And it's very evident. And we know what's going on. David Horowitz has documented this in his book Unholy Alliance. I've documented it in United in Hate. This is a very long discussion, but I will begin with this. Kathy Griffin, Rosie O'Donnell, Chelsea Handler. Oh, there's so much for women, aren't they? When was the last time they spoke up for Asia Bibi, the Christian woman that's been rotting in a Pakistani jail for 8 years because she touched a cup and she's considered filthy because she's a non-Muslim? Why don't they talk about her? It all makes sense. Debbie, the left wants to destroy this society. They're at war with Western civilization, with the Judeo-Christian tradition, with democratic capitalism. They want to destroy this society. And so they reach out in solidarity to adversaries. And so the enemy of my enemy is my friend on the one hand, but they also agree very much with many of the totalitarian strands as well. They cannot admit the evil of Islamic supremacism, because if they do, it will distract them from their hatred of this society.
That is a great answer. That's a great answer. You also, in your book, I love that you ran through the unholy alliance and talked about that. You also just mentioned, it kind of captured well, I thought, the way media, left-wingers, the way that people in our country who are trying to say they are encouraging American society to be tolerant, to be diverse, to be understanding, they will not admit that I think your term was elitism's rules. You must say there's no connection between Islam and Islamic terror. Any attack by Islamists is the fault of the West. Muslims are always the real victims no matter what happens. And any criticism of a particular Muslim or of a terror attack is immediately branded as hatred of an entire group, racism. So that really captures the elitist mindset and what we're dealing with in trying to raise awareness of the issue, to have people understand it. So what is in America, but I love that you wrote this book and others are writing and speaking, but I mean, we've got a real problem in America of having enough people understand that all those elitism rules are actually very, very dangerous for us. So how are you going to solve it all for us?
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. I actually want to ask, if I'm ever tired, can you go on the TV shows for me? Because you're articulating the main themes just perfectly. Thank you so much.
Yes, is the answer.
Real pleasure to speak with you. Look, you bring up jihad denial, and this is our surrender. You see, just the other day, for instance, very typical, walking down the street with, just this gentleman, for instance, we're on our way into the gym, and I'll say, yeah, well, he says, what do you do? I say, well, part of what we do is fighting female genital mutilation in the Islamic world. And within the blink of an eye, he says, oh, well, you know that not all Muslims do that. It's so instinctive in our culture now. It's been drilled into them. I know that all Muslims don't do that. I didn't say that all Muslims do that. I didn't say that, but it's very instinctive, this jihad denial. We want to get rid of female genital mutilation everywhere, including in the Islamic world. But why this instinct to obfuscate and to equivocate and to try to downplay it? It's been drilled into our population. It's jihad denial. Not all Muslims do that. Oh, it's only the extremists. Well, how about the Old Testament, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Mm-hmm. It's very important for the left to practice jihad denial. Very quickly, if you admit that jihad is a problem, then you must admit that the Quranic text and Islamic teachings are a problem. Then you begin to see that there's an evil that's threatening our society and that it's bad. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is that our society is superior and our society is better. Can you already see them starting to quiver? The leftists can't admit that assumption. They can't accept that premise. What's the next conclusion? Our society is worth defending and protecting. Leftists cannot accept that. They want to destroy this capitalist host society, this democratic capitalist society. So Asia Bibi has to be driven into invisibility. Yep. They have to ignore what jihad does and what Sharia does in order not to be distracted from their war on their own host society.
Okay. I hope everyone listening, you should be taking notes. You should
always take notes when I'm talking.
I do too. I take notes when it's a law school habit. I have to take notes. I'll remember it. We are speaking with Jamie Glazov. He's the author of Jihadist Psychopath: How He is Charming, Seducing, and Devouring Us. It's a deep book, but it's actually really readable. Very maybe I shouldn't say you'll enjoy reading, but you'll be glad you read it. Very informative. Also, I want to steer our listeners to your website, jamieglazov.com, on Twitter at Jamie Glazov. He's the editor of the Front Page magazine, the host of the Glazov Gang on his YouTube channel, and he is an author of one other book I wanted to mention, which is, I got to find the name of it. I had it here. You had one other book.
United in hate.
United in hate. And honestly, folks, you know, I think that I will tell you my parting shot in this whole topic. I talk about this a lot on my shows, in my speeches. I'm actually writing my second book. I'm writing a chapter about this also, about protecting America from threats, which is Islamization is one of them. Islamism is one of them. But I think what happens in American culture, in addition to all the other things you're describing, the left has linked arms with Islamists, and the Islamists are seductive, and they dupe us and they confuse us. The other thing that happens is in American culture, I think it's very hard for people rooted in Christianity, rooted in Judaism, to believe that one of the world's, alleged great religions, one of the big five or whatever number you'd count of world religions, actually contains in its founding document, the Quran, in other respected holy writings, scriptural writings of Islam, actually teaches people, encourages people to engage both in violent jihad, authorized, legitimized, and okayed by the Quran, and that those aren't just ancient writings, but that modern day imams and modern day teachers in Islamic universities, Islamic centers, Islamic schools around America teach that, and they teach Islamization as the duty of the devout Muslim. And I just think the reality is, for most Americans who've been raised in a happy, country filled with freedom and the Judeo-Christian values, they can't believe that all that really could be true of Islam. And that's why they buy in so easily to what the left says. Oh, these are just Islamophobes saying all this stuff. So you have a reaction to all that?
Absolutely, Debbie. Look, Kenneth Levin has written a book, The Oslo Syndrome, how communities act under siege, and the Stockholm Syndrome takes place with many people. So during Oslo, many left-wing Israelis and many Israelis were thinking, oh, they can't accept what you were talking about, that there might be a true evil, that you can't be part of the script of. People want to be part of the script. So they were thinking, oh, we just give a little bit of land, and we give a few hugs, and we give some money, and we do this, and then everything will be okay. But when Muhammad Atta on the plane said everything will be okay, everything wasn't okay. And for instance, in battered woman syndrome, when a woman that's being abused and she's being beaten by this awful batter, and she thinks, if I just make the spaghetti a little bit better the next time, it will be better. To be part of the script, to think that you can change something. And in our case, Debbie, here, you can have your prayer rooms over here. We'll change our eating habits over here. Oh, we'll get rid of Robert Spencer and Tommy Robinson over here, and we'll call them racists and Islamophobes just for you, because we're the good kafirs. But it's not going to end up like that, because if there's an evil ideology that hates you and wants to destroy you, you're not part of the script. The only script you need to be writing and being engaged in is defending yourself and the liberties of your society.
Jamie Glazov, that was a great interview. Never long enough. I want to, first of all, thank you for joining me.
I love these compliments. Just keep the compliments coming.
I mean them sincerely. Thank you so much for joining me. And I encourage everyone to buy your book, to read your book, and then give it to their 25 best friends to spread the word around America. Jamie Glazov, thanks for joining me.
Debbie, can I hire you as an agent or a publicist? I've never been so more beautifully treated. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch again. Okay, that was Jamie Glazov. I was feeling kind of bad I didn't do a good enough job introducing him before we started. And just to be sure you know, this is a guy who, in addition to being the editor of Front Page Magazine and having his own YouTube show, the Glazov Gang channel, he has a PhD in history, a specialty in Russian, U.S., and Canadian foreign policy. His book is footnoted to high heaven. In fact, I'll tell you one last thing about his book before I turn to my last topic for today. His book mentions there's a woman who wrote about the way that people who are psychopaths conduct themselves, the way they engage and seduce others. The book is by Martha Stout, a doctor who wrote a book called The Sociopath Next Door, and she talks about the psychology of psychopaths and how they lure in their subjects, how they choose people likely to be easily manipulated. And he actually parallels in the book we were just talking about how the conduct of Islamists, of jihadists, of these Islamic supremacists, parallels the conduct of psychopaths. It's a really unique approach to the issue, a unique approach to the question of how we deal with Islamization in this country, but it really helps you wake up to and recognize just traits you might not have seen, issues you might not have seen, and then now you will. So that was Jamie Glazov, and that was the Jihadist Psychopath book. I really urge you to get it and read it. Okay, one more topic here today on America Can We Talk? Again, I'm Debbie Georgiadis. I'm turning to one more topic. You might have heard that there's a battle ongoing in Washington over the State of the Union, which is a speech given annually by the President of the United States, given in the U.S. House chamber traditionally because it's big enough for everyone to come in and be part of it, be there for it. So the shutdown, which is the battle between Congress and Trump, and Congress, the Democrat-controlled House will not fund the $5 billion Trump wants for the border wall. Trump won't sign a budget without it. The Democrats won't pass a budget with it in, so they're at a stalemate. That's why we're at the shutdown. And so the State of the Union message was to be delivered by President Trump. I think it's usually January 21st, whenever it's right around this time in January. And Nancy Pelosi, as you likely know, sent a letter to Trump basically saying, I'm not going to let you come to the House. I'm going to instruct the Sergeant of Arms not to let you in. You can't come here until we end the shutdown. This is a real power struggle, Nancy Pelosi versus Trump. I'll play a short clip, what Trump had to say about this. He was interviewed recently. Let me just quick play this clip and I'll tell you what I think about it.
So Nancy Pelosi, knowing these facts and knowing it's something that she can't win, that she just went out and said, let's cancel for the first time in the history of our country, let's cancel the State of the Union address. And it's a disgrace. Just so you know, she uses on the basis of the shutdown, but when she asked me to make the address, formally in writing, most of you have a copy of the letter, when she asked me to make the address, she did it during the shutdown, well into the shutdown, by a couple of weeks. So the shutdown was going on. Now she's blaming the shutdown. So if it was because of the shutdown, why do you ask that the address be made? And she asked that the address be made during the shutdown. And now she's blaming the shutdown. She also knew, because she went to our people and she asked, would it be a security problem? She knew it wasn't a security problem. She blamed security, but she knew it wasn't a security problem. And she knew that loud and clear. We'll do something in the alternative. We'll be talking to you about that at a later date.
Okay, I had to laugh during that. I mean, I think Trump, he does crack me up. That was a 1 minute clip or so, 1 minute and 10 seconds or something. He repeats himself about 10 or 15 times, which I have now found amusing. People are used to having very serious politicians, especially presidents and senators, members of the House, and they speak in a very dignified manner and they don't repeat themselves. You know what? He speaks like a New Yorker. I grew up in New York. I can relate to this. I'm fine with it. But he's basically saying, Pelosi invited him to do the shutdown, invited him to do the State of the Union while it was a shutdown, and now she's obviously trying to play hardball, trying to do anything she can to put Trump in a bad position. And it's so interesting. Trump actually had some choices available to him. He could have as many encouraged. In fact, I think I put out on Twitter, why doesn't he just do the State of the Union in one of the newly reopened factories in the heartland of America? I mean, Trump's signature thing, beside building the wall, was bringing jobs back, and he's done that in just record numbers. He could have held the State of the Union, in some factory, some place where big enough to hold a big crowd, bringing the media in. He could have done that. That was one choice he had. He could have done it at the border. That was another choice. Some people were saying, fine, just set something up at the border. Ultimately, he announced, I think it was today or last night, President Trump announced that he is just not going to do the State of the Union somewhere else, even though many were urging him just to find an alternate location. He's saying, no, I'm going to wait until I can do it at the U.S. House. But in case you think that Nancy Pelosi or the Democrats are actually even mildly concerned about the impact of the shutdown, on federal government workers. I'm going to put up on the screen here a tweet by Steve Scalise, Republican congressman, who was pointing out, and this is, by the way, the second time this has happened. In the House, there was a vote on whether or not, and I'm just going to read it, 215 Democrats voted to not pay federal workers as we continue negotiating to secure our border and open the government. Every Republican voted yes. Democrats are so committed to their open border agenda that they've twice voted to deprive federal workers of their paychecks. You got to understand how important that is. Nancy Pelosi and the Dems are trying to say, well, we're doing anything we can think of to protect the poor federal workers, and the shutdown is so wrong. And so, we're going to hold up the State of the Union in order not to have this, this shutdown continue because we care about the federal workers. Truth is, twice they had the chance in the House to pass a bill to pay the federal workers. They won't do it. Nancy Pelosi thinks she is benefiting from the status quo in Washington, that the shutdown means that federal workers aren't getting paychecks. She thinks this helps her. My 2 cents, I think that Trump is winning this battle. I think actually to not hold the State of the Union in some other place, first I was kind of like, come on, Trump, just hold us somewhere else. Don't let her win this one. But really, the State of the Union is one of those dignified, astonishingly important things that happens once a year. It's a magnificent tradition. Millions of Americans tune in. And for him to say, no, okay, we'll hold off until we have a settlement here. He's not agreeing he's going to give the Democrats what they want, that he's going to sign a bill without the border wall money in it. He's just saying, I'll hold off on this. I think Trump played the grown-up in this role. He ends up looking like the mature statesman grown-up. And Nancy Pelosi, especially given the Democrats won't even vote to pay the federal workers about whom they're supposedly so concerned, I think Nancy Pelosi looked like the small, petulant, petty, mean-spirited politician that she really is. I'm Debbie Georges. This is America Can We Talk. We do this show Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, right here on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live. It's out on all sorts of podcast aggregators. I do it now at the Real News Communications Network, RNCN, part of Real News PR, and you can go to their Facebook page, you can go to their website, watch the show also. And in case you didn't know, if you haven't listened before, the only reason I do radio, I'm a lawyer by background. I mean, I don't have any professional radio training. I do this show to advocate for the unique, extraordinary, exceptional identity of America, to advocate that Americans in every generation have the obligation to speak up, to defend and protect this extraordinary experiment in human liberty. I talk truth about America every week because America matters. I'll talk to you next time.
Can we talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear?